So I've got this CD right here, B-52's Time Capsule, 1998. Right on the case, HDCD logo. Right there on the disc, HDCD logo. It's legit, it's official, the real deal. So I fire up FooBar 2000, throw the disc in, and hit play. And FooBar looks at it and says, fake. Fake? I got the logo on the case. I got the logo on the disc. And the software is calling it fake. That sent me down a rabbit hole that took weeks to untangle. And what I found at the bottom of that rabbit hole is one of the most interesting stories in physical media history. Stick around.
Let's go into the MonroeWorld.
Hi everyone, Shane R. Monroe here. All right, so HDCD, high definition compatible digital. Mid-90s format developed by a company called Pacific Microsonics. The pitch was simple. More dynamic range out of a standard 16-bit CD. Same disc, same type of player, backward compatible, just more. How? By encoding extra information into the least significant bits of the audio stream. Hidden data invisible to regular players, but a compatible decoder hardware or software could read those bits and expand the audio back out to something approaching 20-bit quality. Sounds great, right? There were over 5,000 HD CD titles released. Neil Young was a massive fan. So were the Grateful Dead, Beach Boys. Reference recordings put it on basically everything they made. And then, nothing. Pacific Microsonics sold to Microsoft in 2000, rebranding the website as Windows Media Technology. The website went dark in 2005, format dead and buried. But those 5,000 discs are still out there in thrift stores, in your collection, maybe with a logo on them, maybe without. And here's where it gets complicated. So let me explain what HDCD actually is, because most people, including a lot of Audiophile forum regulars, don't seem to actually know. HDCD isn't one thing, it's three things. Feature 1, peak extend. This is the big one. During mastering, the engineer compresses the top 9 decibels of the dynamic range into the top 3 decibels of the 16-bit stream. Soft limiting. The loud stuff gets squashed down to fit. The whole signal also gets dropped 6 dB to make room. A compatible decoder on playback expands it all back out. 9 dB restored, gain is corrected, peaks are breathing naturally again. This is real, measurable, and I'm going to prove it to you in about 5 minutes. Feature 2, low-level gain adjustment. A gain boost on very quiet passages, below about negative 45 dB relative to full scale. In practice, almost nothing activates on that except maybe fade outs, kind of irrelevant for mainstream music. Feature 3, transient filter. Oh, this one. This one is where everything gets weird. The transient filter is the reason that FooBar called my B-52's disc fake. To understand it, you need to understand a problem that existed in CD audio from day one. The math of 44.1 kilohertz digital audio requires a filter, a very sharp one, right at 22 kilohertz. You need a flat frequency response all the way out to 20 kilohertz, the top of human hearing, but you absolutely cannot have any audio energy above 22 kilohertz or you get alias distortion. You need a brick wall filter right at that boundary. And that brick wall filter has side effects, nasty ones. It smears transients. It causes ripple in the passband, small variations of volume across the audible frequency range that shouldn't be there. It's one of the main reasons early CD audio sounded harsh and fatiguing compared to analog tape. The math required to make a CD work could be actively degrading the sound. Pacific Microsonics spent years solving this problem. Their AD converter ran at 24-bit 176.4 kilohertz, massively oversampled from 44.1, using a proprietary dynamic decimation filter to bring it down to the 41.1 kilohertz CD standard in a way that minimized those artifacts. Smoother transients, less harshness, more analog-like. When a mastering engineer used this hardware and engaged that specific filter, the HDCD encoder dropped a flag into the disk subcode, and that flag was a hardware-to-hardware instruction. Not a simple on-off switch either, it was dynamic. The encoder was actively detecting high-level transients in real time and signaling the DAC on the playback end to switch the complementary filter for that specific moment. Less ringing, smoother reconstruction, then switch playback back for steadier signals. The idea was to bookend the chain. What went in through Pacific Microsonics' specific filter on the way to digital comes back out through the matching filter on the way back to analog. Undo what was done, restore what was lost. That's the transient filter, not magic, just math. Here's where it turns into BS territory. And I mean that literally. Beautiful speculation. Nobody has ever published what those filter coefficients actually were. Pacific Microsonics never released the specs. Microsoft bought the IP and buried it. The PMD2 chip found in HDCD players is a black box. So when my Toshiba lights up and switches its reconstruction filter in response to that flag, it is doing something. The hardware is responding exactly as designed, but whether it's doing the right something, whether the filter it switches to actually complements what the mastering engineer used in the audio, whether it sounds better or just different, genuinely unknown, possibly unknowable. And in software, here's the precise reason it doesn't work. And it's not quite what you would expect. A software player like VLC, Winamp, or FooBar outputs a stream of numbers, PCM data. The reconstruction filter, the thing that turns those numbers back into a continuous analog wave, that happens at the DAC, after the software is done. So by the time FooBar has finished its job, the reconstruction stage hasn't happened yet. The filter instruction arrives with nobody home to answer the door. Could software theoretically approximate it? Maybe. If a player were upsampling to 128 kilohertz, it could probably apply a digital filter that mimics Pacific Microsonics' curve. But since nobody has the mathematical coefficients, nobody has programmed it, and nobody ever will. So every software decoder ever made, FooBar, FFmpeg, Windows Media Player, JRiver, every single one sees the transient filter flag and goes, there's HDCD, then says, oh, can't process, and moves on. And FooBar specifically calls it fake. Probably a poor choice of wording. It's not counterfeit, it's not broken. Fake, meaning the software found valid HDCD packets, but nothing it can do anything about. That's all it means. So here's where we land on transient filter. In software, the flag lands in an empty room. In hardware, something is happening in that Toshiba DAC. We just can't prove it sounds better. We can't even capture it. We can't compare it. We can't verify it. Here's the reframe. Think of that transient filter flag less like a technical enhancement and more like a certified organic sticker for audio. It confirms the disc went through a tens of $1,000s signal chain, one of maybe 100 machines that ever existed on the entire planet, designed by some of the best engineers of the era to solve a real documented problem in CD audio. The actual improvement was already achieved the moment the analog signal hit those converters. Whatever the Toshiba reconstruction filter does on playback, that's just a cherry on top of a sundae that was already perfect. The transient filter is a set of instructions for a ghost in the machine, and if you don't have the specific 90s era chip, the ghost isn't there to hear. So I started pulling discs. B-52's time capsule, logo on the case, logo on the disc, FooBar fake, Easy CD audio converter says HDCD detected. My Toshiba SD2700U, a DVD player with a genuine PMD200 chip inside, HDCD light comes on. The disc is real. The software just can't touch it. Chris Isaac, Speak of the Devil, Counting Crows, Recovering the Satellites, Paula Cole, This Fire, 4 discs, 4 FooBar failures, 4 Toshiba confirmations. Every single one, transient filter only. No peak extend, no low-level gain, just the filter instruction that software will never decode. This isn't unusual. This is the most mainstream commercial HDCD releases from the mid to late 90s. The Pacific Microsonics converters were so good that engineers used them as their primary AD, regardless of whether they were deliberately deploying HDCD features. The transient filter activated by default, the logo got printed, the discs got shipped. It was passive marketing contagion. The hardware sold the format's reputation without the format's actual dynamic features always being deployed. So if you've been trying to verify your HDCD collection in FooBar and getting nothing, now you know why. It's not you. It's not your RIP. It's a set of instructions for a ghost that your software will never see. All right, so that's the bad news. Here's the good news. Peak Extend, the real feature, the one that actually does something measurable to the audio. That one works. Software can decode it, and I found a disc that proves it. Neil Young, Silver and Gold, 2000 Reprise Records. Logo on the disc confirmed via packet level analysis. 30,000 error-free HDCD packets per channel, all signaling Peak Extend. Neil Young's engineering team went all in on this one, and they used the same Pacific Microsonics hardware that made those B-52s and Chris Isaak discs sound so good. So this time, they turned the big features on. Let me show you what that actually looks like. Here is what I did. I ripped track 7 twice. First rip, HDCD detection off, 16-bit FLAC, raw, exactly what's on the disc, no processing whatsoever. Exactly what you would hear on a standard CD player. Second rip, HDCD decoding on, 24-bit FLAC, easy CD, reading those packets and expanding the peaks back out again, gain restored. Now I load both into Audacity alongside a third version, the decoded file without the gain restoration, so I can do a proper level comparison. 3 files, same track, 3 different states. Here's what's interesting. The raw 16-bit file looks the loudest on screen. Big, dense waveform fills the track. But that's an illusion. The HDCD encoding soft limits the peaks and compresses everything into a tighter dynamic range. It looks loud because everything is squashed together, like a photo with the contrast cranked up. Vivid, but not altogether accurate. The decoded version, with the gain restored, that's what the Toshiba more or less outputs. That's what the format was designed to sound like. Peaks expanded back to their natural state, gain corrected, full dynamic range. Where's the proof? Here it is. We turn on Show Clipping in Audacity. The raw 16-bit track, totally clean, no clipping. The peaks are being held below the ceiling, constrained, exactly as encoded. The decoded track, with gain restored, red clipping markers on the loudest peaks. Now, before you panic, that's not distortion. That's the peaks being restored to their natural level above where the soft limiter was sitting. The 24-bit container handles it fine. Those red marks are the audio that was hidden inside the encoded stream. Those red marks are essentially the HDCD data. Make it visible. It's a bit more technical than that, but this is the best way to kind of see it visually. The FooBar scanner confirms it too, right there on screen. Valid HDCD, valid high PE, peak extension enabled, 30,000 packets all doing real work. That's the proof. So I sat down with excellent headphones, Sennheiser HD 300, level matched as carefully as I could, listened back and forth between the raw and the decoded versions. And I'm going to be completely honest with you here. I cannot hear a difference. I know it's there. I can see it. The waveforms are different. The data is different. The scanner confirms it. 30,000 packets doing all real work. And I sat there with good headphones and I could not reliably tell which was which. Other tests on the internet fare similarly, with far better equipment than I have, I might add. Now, maybe that's my ears. Maybe it's the music. Silver and Gold is a relatively quiet acoustic album, not exactly a loudness war stress test. Maybe on a different recording with more aggressive dynamic range. Maybe it's audible. But here's what I think is actually going on. The audiophile community spent decades mythologizing HDCD, claiming transformative differences, telling you that if you couldn't hear it, you didn't have good enough equipment. And the reality, based on controlled testing, based on actual waveform data, is that peak extend is real and measurable and subtle enough that it frequently falls below the threshold of audio perception in normal listening conditions. That doesn't make it fake. The data proves it's not fake. It just means that the format's reach exceeded its audible grasp in most cases. So where does that leave us? 5,000 titles, 2 populations. Population 1, transient filter only. The mainstream releases, the B-52s, the Counting Crows, the Chris Isaaks, logo on the disc, Software completely blind to them. The only device that processes them correctly is hardware with a genuine PMD200 chip. But here's the real reframe. Again, without peak extend, there's no digital unfolding to do. There's no ghost to call. You're just listening to a really well-made 16-bit CD. And given how good those specific Microsonics converters were, given that maybe 100 of those machines ever existed on the entire planet, that's not nothing. That HDCD logo isn't a lie. It's a provenance stamp. It means the disc went through world-class gear, specifically engineered to solve the harshness problems that plagued CD audio. The improvement was already baked in before the encoder touched it. Population 2, Peak Extend, the Neil Youngs, the Reference Recordings Catalog, the Audiophile labels that actually use the feature aggressively. Measurable, software decodable, rippable to 24-bit FLAC with easy CD, waveform differences visible, audio difference, real but subtle. For the collector and the archivist, the right workflow is simple. Rip everything to raw 16-bit FLAC first. That preserves the encoded stream exactly as it left the factory. Then scan for peak extend. For confirmed PE discs, optionally create a decoded 24-bit copy for playback. Keep the raw 16-bit original regardless. That's your archive master. Do not blindly decode everything to 24-bit. For TF-only discs, you will get no benefit, just bigger files. Hey, and for those transient filter discs, play them on hardware. That's what the Toshiba is for. The HDCD light comes on, the ghosts show us up, whether you can hear it or not. Final verdict, HDCD, real, measurable, provable. For most discs, only real hardware can unlock the secret sauce, but that largely doesn't matter because these certified organic discs already sound better than most other CDs of the era. But for those HDCDs where the engineer went above and beyond the call, you can rip them today and gain the benefit of software playback. And that's a beautiful thing. Listen, I hope you enjoyed this ridiculously complicated look at a long dead format. It really took weeks of buying and researching to put this together, but I finally feel like I understand this format to the nth degree. And now, so do you. If you like what we're doing here, like, sub, hype, you guys know what to do. Leave a comment about HDCDs in your collection. Do you have the hardware? Can you hear the difference? I most certainly want to hear from you. I'm Shane R. Monroe. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.